way you can fix it. And so, okay, so you're living in one of these bloody things, and you might as well, it seems to me, you might as well make it the best one you could live in because you don't have anything better to do. Now, if you don't do that, if you don't do it consciously, and this is what the psychoanalysts pointed out, is that you have innumerable quasi-autonomous subsystems that make you up that will generate stories impulsively, and you'll just act them out. And you know that because you watch yourself over 2 weeks and you think, Jesus, I did a lot of stupid things in the last 2 weeks. And you think, why? And it's because you're a collection of somewhat random quasi-autonomous personality units, and lacking a leader, they're just going to fire off whenever they want. You know, first you're hungry, then you're thirsty, then you want to go to bed with your wife, you know, then you want to sleep in, then you want to tell your boss off, then you want to curse at the guy that cuts you off in traffic. It's like, you're kind of like a 2-year-old, you know, just it's one emotional frame after another vying for dominance. There's no overarching hierarchy, and there's no king at the top. And so, you know, we already talked about pyramids of competence, and what's supposed to be at the top is you want to bring all those things together. We understand this neurologically. I'll show you some of that in a little bit. We understand this neurologically, how this maps in some sense right onto the neural structure of your being. You want to put something in control, and the thing that you should put in control is the bloody thing that pays attention and learns, right? Everything's clean up room, and then they can do it. They know what it means. So, but you do the building from the bottom up. And lots of times when you're arguing with someone that you live with and hypothetically love, although those two things are hard to get together in the same relationship, what you want to do is assume stupidity before you assume total malevolence. That's a good rule of thumb for establishing peace. So maybe if your partner won't do something, well, maybe there's something going on up here, but you might want to assume to begin with that they actually just don't know how to do it, and you need to decompose it. So maybe there's a way you want to be greeted when you come home, because you're going to come home every day probably, and maybe that's a 5-minute interaction or a 10-minute interaction. So that's an hour a week or 4 hours a month or 50 hours a year or one solid work week of coming home interactions, right? All you have to do is get 50 interactions like that right, and you've got your relationship sorted out. That's something that's really worth thinking about, because that's it. You just don't have that much time, right? Get the meals sorted out. That's about 5 hours a day. Get your sleeping time arrangements sorted out. Get the fundamental interactions that you repeat with your partner worked out voluntarily and negotiated. You're going to cover 80% of your life that way, and then it can just run as a routine. And that's really helpful. And if you don't do that consciously, especially because our roles have fragmented and most of the traditional roles have disappeared, and so nobody knows who the hell is supposed to do what in the kitchen, for example. So nobody does anything except bitch and fight and make wretched meals or buy fast food or something like that. So, you know, the alternative to that catastrophic failure or continual resentment and fighting is to rebuild the structures from the bottom up using consensus and negotiation. And you can do that. So you can think of that as the patriarchal structure.